David Carter adjusted his tie as he sat in the stark, utilitarian office of Carter & Associates, a law firm that had seen better days. The holographic screen in front of him flickered briefly before stabilizing to show his schedule for the day. Nothing out of the ordinary, just another day of small claims and mundane contractual disputes. That is, until his assistant, Mike, buzzed in on the intercom. "David, there's someone here to see you. Says it's urgent, but they aren't on the schedule." Mike's voice crackled through the speaker. David sighed. "Send them in, Mike." Moments later, the door opened with a soft hiss, and in walked a figure unlike any David had seen before. The visitor was tall, with iridescent skin that shimmered with each movement, and eyes that held the depth of the cosmos. This had to be a Thaloxi. David had read about them, but never met one in person. "Mr. Carter, I presume." The Thaloxi's voice was a smooth, melodious contrast to its imposing presence. "I am Celera, and I require your legal expertise." David stood and extended his hand, a gesture he instantly felt might be presumptuous. But Celera understood, gently enveloping his hand with her own, 3 fingers, cool to the touch. "Please, have a seat, Ms. Celera. How can I assist you today?" David motioned to the chair across from his desk. "It's quite a complex matter," Celera began, settling gracefully into the chair. "My people, the Thaloxi, have been exploited by a corporation, galaxy-wide corporation. They have been mining on our territories without any formal agreement or compensation. We wish to seek justice and what is rightfully ours." David nodded, his interest piqued. This was no ordinary legal matter. It was the kind that could make or break his career. "I see. And why come to me?" "I assume there are lawyers with more interstellar experience." Celera's lips curved in a smile, an expression David found remarkably human. "We've done our research, Mr. Carter. You are known for your thoroughness and your advocacy for the underrepresented. We believe these traits are what we need." "I'm flattered, truly," David replied, his professional demeanor masking his excitement. "And I'm willing to take on your case. However, I must warn you, this will involve a steep learning curve on my part, and we will be going up against a corporate giant." "That is a risk we are prepared to take," Celera affirmed. "And we are not without our own resources. We can provide information and evidence. What we lack is someone who can navigate the human legal system." "Very well," David said as he powered up his tablet, ready to take notes. "Let's get started by gathering all the details. The more I know, the better equipped we'll be." For the next hour, they discussed the intricacies of Thaloxi culture, the specifics of the exploitation, and the potential legal frameworks they could exploit. As the conversation unfolded, David found himself not only professionally engaged, but personally invested. Celera was not just a client. She was a bridge to a new understanding, a partner in a fight for justice. As Celera spoke, animated and passionate, David realized this was no ordinary case. It was a challenge, a chance to make a significant impact, not just for one client, but potentially for the entire framework of interstellar law and relations. By the time Celera stood to leave, David was filled with a newfound determination. "We'll start with the preliminary filings tomorrow. I'll need everything you can provide on Galaxy-Wide's operations." "We will provide it," Celera assured him. "Thank you, David Carter. I believe we have made the right choice in coming to you." As the door closed behind her, David sat back in his chair, the weight of the task ahead dawning on him. He was no longer just a lawyer. He was a man on a mission, and with Celera and the Thaloxi relying on him, failure was not an option. Chapter 2. The Thaloxi Enigma. David Carter stood at the edge of his office, looking out over the city skyline, pondering the vastness of the universe and the peculiarities of his latest case. He had spent the evening prior studying up on Thaloxi culture and their legal precedents, but the more he learned, the more questions he had. As he sipped his morning coffee, his assistant Mike walked in with a stack of digital files and legal pads. "Morning, David. I've compiled the information you requested on interstellar law and the galaxy-wide corp's past dealings," Mike announced, placing the hefty stack on the desk with a thud. "Thanks, Mike. We've got our work cut out for us," David said, scanning the files. "I want you to help me dig deeper into Galaxy-Wide's mining operations. Anything that looks off, I want to know about it." "Will do," Mike replied, pulling up a chair next to David. "I also saw you have a meeting scheduled with Ms. Celera today. What's the plan?" David nodded. "She's going to bring more details from her side. I need to understand their claims fully. It's not just about the legal aspects. It's about understanding Thaloxi norms and how they interpret agreements." The intercom buzzed, and Mike answered it. "Yes. Oh, right away." He looked at David. "Celera's here." "Send her in," David responded. Celera entered, her presence commanding yet serene. She nodded at Mike before focusing on David. "Good morning, David. I have brought the documents you requested, including detailed reports of the unauthorized mining operations and their impact on our territories." "Thank you, Celera." "Let's get started," David said, gesturing towards the documents she placed on the table. The two of them, along with Mike, spent the morning poring over the details, comparing notes, and discussing the legal ramifications. "Celera, these documents mention Lixara Fields multiple times. It seems to be a significant site. Can you explain its importance to your people?" David asked, looking up from a digital map dotted with mining sites. Celera's expression grew solemn. "Lixara Fields is not just a mining site. It is a sacred place for us. It is where we believe the spirits of our ancestors reside. Galaxy-Wide's actions there are not just illegal. They are a profound violation of our cultural heritage." David's eyes widened, understanding the gravity of the situation. "That's crucial, Celera. It's not only a legal battle, it's a moral one. We can argue severe cultural damage." Mike chimed in. "That could strengthen our case significantly. Public sympathy could sway in our favor once they understand what's at stake." "Exactly," David agreed, making notes. "We need to prepare a presentation that outlines not just the legal violations, but the cultural atrocities committed by Galaxy-Wide. We have to make them see the Thaloxi as more than just claimants. They are victims here." Celera nodded in agreement. "I believe once they understand who we are and what we've lost, the tribunal will see the justice of our cause." The trio worked through the afternoon, strategizing and building a compelling case. David was meticulous, asking Celera countless questions to ensure every detail was accurate and every argument was ironclad. As the day turned to evening, Mike stood stretching his back. "I think we've got a solid start here. I'll get these arguments formatted into the presentation." "Thanks, Mike." "Good work today," David said, appreciating Mike's efforts. Celera stood, her demeanor appreciative. "David, Mike, thank you both. I am reassured by your dedication. It's more than just a case for us, Celera. It's about fairness, about righting a wrong," David replied earnestly. As Celera left, David and Mike looked over the cityscape, the lights flickering on as night fell. They were small figures in a vast universe, but in their office, huddled over piles of documents, they were giants gearing up for a monumental battle. Chapter 3. Legal Entanglements. David sat hunched over his desk early in the morning, surrounded by digital screens displaying various interstellar legal codes and mining regulations. His focus was intense, passing through complex legal jargon that spanned galaxies and cultures. His office was quiet, save for the soft tapping of his keyboard and the occasional sip of his now lukewarm coffee. The door to his office slid open, and Mike entered, his hands full of new messages and updates. "Morning, David. I've got updates on the galaxy-wide situation, and there's a call scheduled with a contact from the Intergalactic Mining Authority in an hour." David nodded without looking up. "Thanks, Mike. Any word from our inside contact at Galaxy-wide?" "Not yet. Still waiting for a callback." "I'll keep you posted," Mike replied, setting the documents on the cluttered desk. "I also have the revised drafts of our legal filings. I incorporated the amendments you suggested last night." David finally looked up, rubbing his eyes. "Great work, Mike. Let's go through those amendments before the call. We need to ensure everything is watertight." As they reviewed the documents, the intercom buzzed. Mike answered, listened for a moment, then turned to David. "It's our contact, Jared, from Galaxy-wide. He's ready to talk." "Put him through here," David said, straightening up in his chair. The screen flickered, and then the image of a middle-aged man appeared, looking slightly uncomfortable. "David, Mike, thanks for taking my call," Jared began, shifting in his seat. "I know this is awkward, given my position at Galaxy-wide, but I want to help. What's happening isn't right." David leaned forward, his tone serious but welcoming. "We appreciate you reaching out, Jared. Any information you can provide could be crucial." Jared nodded, glancing off-screen as if checking for eavesdroppers. "I've seen documents that aren't public. Galaxy-wide knew about the cultural significance of the Lixara fields before they started mining. They pushed ahead anyway, figuring it would be too costly for anyone to challenge them legally." "That's exactly the kind of evidence we need," Mike interjected, his eyes wide with the implications. "Can you get us copies?" "I can try. It's risky, but I'll do what I can." "I believe in what you're trying to do," Jared responded, his voice determined. After Jared logged off, promising to be in touch soon, David turned to Mike. "If Jared comes through, that could change everything. We should prepare to add this to our filings." "Agreed," Mike said. "I'll set up a secure line for Jared to send the documents. We need to keep this quiet until we're ready." The rest of the morning was spent in preparation for the call with the Intergalactic Mining Authority. When it came time, David and Mike gathered in the conference room, where they were joined virtually by an official from the authority, a stern-looking woman named Director Lon. "Mr. Carter, we've reviewed your preliminary filings. While your claims are serious, you'll need substantial evidence to proceed against a corporation with the resources of Galaxy-wide," Director Lon stated flatly. "We understand, Director," David replied, maintaining a calm demeanor. "We believe we will provide sufficient evidence to not only proceed but to prevail." Director Lon raised an eyebrow. "I hope for your sake you are correct. The authority does not take kindly to frivolous claims. Keep us updated with any new developments." "Will do, Director." "Thank you for your time," David said as the call ended. He and Mike sat back, the weight of the challenge ahead settling over them. "We're going to need more than just Jared's evidence," David mused aloud. "Agreed. I'll reach out to a few more contacts who might be able to shed light on Galaxy-wide's operations." "We need all the help we can get," Mike suggested, already drafting messages on his tablet. As the day wound down, David felt the pressure mounting, but also a sense of purpose. With each new piece of evidence, each supportive contact like Jared, their case grew stronger. The battle ahead would be tough, but they were building an arsenal to confront one of the galaxy's biggest giants. Chapter 4. A Cosmic Connection. Late one evening, After hours of sifting through interstellar legal precedents, David and Mike were still at the office, surrounded by holographic displays of case files and legal texts. The room was filled with a soft glow from the screens, casting long shadows across the floor. David leaned back in his chair, exhaustion evident on his face. Mike noticed his fatigue and stood up, stretching his limbs. "David, we've been at this for hours. Maybe we should call it a night." David sighed, rubbing his temples. "You might be right, Mike. But let's go over this new evidence one more time. I feel like we're close to a breakthrough." As they reviewed the data again, the intercom buzzed. Surprised by the late visitor, Mike answered. "Yes, who is it?" "It's Celera. I hope I'm not intruding, but I have some additional information that might help," came Celera's voice, calm and measured. "Come on up," Mike responded, and moments later, Celera entered the room. She carried a small data device, which she handed to David. This contains detailed accounts of the initial survey galaxy-wide conducted on the Lixara fields. It might prove they had prior knowledge of the site's significance. "Thank you, Celera. This could be exactly what we need," David said, his fatigue momentarily forgotten as he inserted the device into his console. Files began to populate the screen, and the three of them dove into the new information. As they worked, Celera explained more about her culture and the significance of the Lixara fields, giving David and Mike a deeper understanding of what was at stake. Her words painted a vivid picture of Thaloxi ceremonies and the spiritual connection her people had with the land. "It's more than just a place to us," Celera said softly. "It's where we feel closest to our ancestors, where we go to seek guidance in tough times." Mike nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Hearing this makes it all the more important that we win this case." David agreed, his eyes scanning the documents. "Celera, your testimony about these traditions will be powerful in court. It's one thing to read about these violations, but hearing it directly from you will make a strong impact." "I am ready to do whatever it takes," Celera affirmed, her determination clear. The conversation shifted as they continued to sift through the data. David and Mike asked Celera about Thaloxi interpretations of justice and law, trying to weave these concepts into their legal strategy. As the night wore on, they made significant progress, piecing together a narrative that was both legally sound and deeply human. The connection between David, Mike, and Celera grew stronger, bonded by their shared commitment to the case. "Working through this with you both has given me a new perspective on what justice can look like," Celera remarked, a trace of a smile on her face. David returned the smile, his earlier weariness replaced by a renewed sense of purpose. "And you've taught us more than just legal strategies. You've shown us the importance of understanding and respecting different cultures." As the early morning light began to seep through the blinds, they decided to finally call it a night. Mike gathered the files they would need for the next day, while David walked Celera to the door. "Thank you, Celera, for everything tonight. Not just the data, but for sharing your story with us," David said genuinely. "It is I who should thank you," Celera responded, her tone warm, "for not only hearing our story, but truly listening." As Celera left, David and Mike returned to their desks, motivated by the night's revelations and the deep human and interstellar connections they had forged. They knew the road ahead was still long and uncertain, but for the first time, it felt undeniably hopeful. Chapter 5. Cultural Revelations. David Carter woke to the soft chirping of his alarm, signaling another day steeped in preparation and discovery. Today, however, was not just another day at the office. David was scheduled to visit the Thaloxi homeworld with Celera, a trip intended to gather first-hand evidence for the case and deepen his understanding of Thaloxi culture. As he prepared for the journey, Mike arrived, his usual calm demeanor replaced with an excited energy. "David, this is a big day." Seeing the Thaloxi homeworld could really solidify our understanding of what's at stake for Solara's people. David nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility. Exactly, Mike. We need to absorb as much as we can today. It's one thing to hear about it, and another to see it with our own eyes. The journey through space was swift, courtesy of Thaloxi technology. As they approached the planet, Solara pointed out significant landmarks visible from the spacecraft's viewports. There, she said, pointing to a vast green expanse surrounded by shimmering blue waters, is the Lixara Fields. You will see why it is sacred to us. Upon landing, David and Mike were greeted by a delegation of Thaloxi elders. The elders were dignified, their eyes wise and welcoming. They led the group through a path lined with vibrant flora to a large, open pavilion where the community had gathered to meet the Earth visitors. One elder, who introduced himself as Malon, spoke first. We are honored to welcome you to our world. Today, we share with you our heritage, in hope that you will share our story with the universe. David listened intently as Malon and other community members recounted the history of the Lixara Fields, describing ceremonies and gatherings that had taken place for generations. The narratives were rich with emotion and tied deeply to the land. As the elders spoke, Mike recorded everything, knowing the importance of these testimonies. He whispered to David, "This is powerful stuff. It's not just about the legal argument anymore. It's about preserving a way of life." "Absolutely," David agreed, deeply moved by the stories he heard. He turned to Solara, who was watching her elders with a mixture of pride and sadness. "Solara, could you explain a bit about how these fields are used in your daily and spiritual lives?" Solara nodded, gesturing towards the vast fields beyond the pavilion. Beyond their beauty, these fields are our spiritual center. Here we connect with our ancestors, seek wisdom in times of uncertainty, and celebrate the cycles of life and nature. Every Thaloxi child learns to walk here. Every elder hopes to find peace here in their final days. The tour continued with a visit to a nearby cultural center, where ancient Thaloxi artifacts were preserved. Each item, Solara explained, had a story connected to the Lixara Fields. These artifacts are not just relics. They are reminders of who we are and what we must protect. As the day ended, the group sat down to a traditional Thaloxi meal, sharing food and stories under the setting sun. The conversation shifted from formal testimonies to personal stories, creating a bridge of understanding and empathy. "Today has been enlightening," David said to Solara as they walked back to their ship under the stars. "Seeing your world, hearing your stories, it's changed the way I see our case. It's more than a legal battle. It's a fight for cultural survival." Solara smiled, her eyes reflecting the starlight. "Thank you, David. By understanding us, you help us tell our story to the galaxy. Whatever the outcome, today has made a difference." David and Mike left the Thaloxi homeworld with not just evidence and testimonials, but a profound respect and commitment to their cause. They knew the battle ahead in the tribunal would be challenging, but they were now armed with a deeper purpose and connection to the people they were fighting for. Chapter 6. The Hearing. David Carter stood outside the grand chambers of the Intergalactic Tribunal, reviewing his notes one last time. The sprawling complex buzzed with activity, as species from various corners of the universe gathered to resolve their disputes. Today, it was his turn to present the case of the Thaloxi against Galaxy-wide Corp. Mike approached him, tablet in hand. "David, we've got everything lined up. The evidence is solid, and the cultural testimonials are compelling. I think we're as ready as we can be." David nodded, feeling a surge of anticipation. "Thanks, Mike. It's time to make sure the tribunal understands exactly what's at stake here." They entered the chambers together, the vast room lined with representatives of different alien species. At the center, A high bench housed the tribunal judges, a diverse group chosen for their impartiality and understanding of galactic law. Celera joined them, her demeanor calm but determined. "David, I have spoken with the elders this morning. They trust you to speak for us." "We all do." "I won't let you down, Celera," David replied, offering a reassuring smile as they took their seats. The hearing began with formalities, each party introducing themselves. When it was his turn, David stood, cleared his throat, and addressed the tribunal. "Honorable judges, we are here today not just to argue a case of unauthorized mining, but to defend the very soul of a culture, the Thaloxi people's connection to their ancestral lands at the Lixara fields." A judge, a wise-looking being with luminescent skin, nodded. "Proceed, Mr. Carter." David outlined the case, presenting evidence of Galaxy-wide's knowledge of the cultural significance of the fields and their deliberate disregard for Thaloxi rights. Mike displayed the documents and images on the large screen behind them, each piece of evidence supporting their claims. When it was time for the testimonial, Celera took the stand. Her voice was clear and resonant as she spoke of her people's traditions and the sacredness of the Lixara fields. "These lands are where we connect with our past and where we hope to build our future. What has been taken from us is not just resources, but our heritage." The opposing counsel, a sharp-tongued lawyer from Galaxy-wide, tried to undermine their case, questioning the validity of the Thaloxi's claims to the land and the economic necessity of the mining operations. "Is it not true," he posed slickly, "that the Thaloxi territories are underutilized, and that Galaxy-wide's operations bring much-needed economic development?" David countered calmly but firmly, "The economic benefits you mention cannot justify the destruction of a people's culture and history. The Thaloxi have not consented to this exploitation, and economic gain does not grant Galaxy-wide the right to violate galactic law and moral decency." The debate was intense, with back-and-forth arguments that tested David's legal acumen and emotional resilience. Throughout, Mike provided David with notes and reminders, helping him counter every point raised by the opposition. As the hearing drew to a close, David made a final plea. "This tribunal has the opportunity to send a message across the galaxies, that culture and heritage are to be respected, that mighty corporations like Galaxy-wide cannot trample on the rights of any species, regardless of their economic power." The judges retreated to deliberate, leaving the courtroom buzzing with whispered discussions and speculation. Celera turned to David and Mike, her eyes reflecting the weight of the moment. "No matter the decision, you have already given us a voice." "Thank you." David smiled, feeling the fatigue of the day but buoyed by her words. "It's been our honor, Celera." As they awaited the verdict, David, Mike, and Celera discussed the potential outcomes, prepared for any decision but hopeful for justice. The return of the judges signaled the end of their wait. The room fell silent as the head judge prepared to deliver the verdict, a moment that would define not just a legal battle but the future of a culture. Chapter 7. Verdict of the Stars. The atmosphere in the intergalactic tribunal was thick with anticipation as everyone awaited the verdict. David, Mike, and Celera sat together, their shared tension palpable. The chamber was silent, all eyes fixed on the judge's bench where the members of the tribunal convened, whispering and nodding to one another as they reviewed their final notes. Finally, the head judge, a stern, grey-skinned Zeltroni, stood and addressed the room. His voice echoed through the chamber, authoritative and clear. "We have reached a decision in the case of the Thaloxi people versus Galaxy-wide Corporation." David gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles white. Mike leaned forward, his expression one of intense focus. Celera held her breath, her eyes never wavering from the judges. The judge continued, "After careful consideration of the evidence presented, we find that Galaxy-wide Corporation did indeed violate the sovereign rights of the Thaloxi people by conducting unauthorized mining operations on the sacred Lixara fields." A murmur ran through the chamber. Celera's hand went to her mouth, a gesture of restrained emotion. The judge wasn't finished. Furthermore, we find that these actions were taken with full knowledge of their cultural significance to the Thaloxi people. Therefore, we order Galaxy-wide Corporation to cease all mining activities immediately and to pay reparations to the Thaloxi people for the damage incurred. Cheers broke out among the Thaloxi delegation. Celera turned to David and Mike, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "You did it," she whispered. David smiled, relief washing over him. "We did it together, Celera." Mike clapped David on the back, a broad grin spreading across his face. "What a case! This will set a precedent for years to come." The opposing counsel from Galaxy-wide sat in stunned silence, their case dismantled by the tribunal's firm ruling. They hurriedly gathered their documents, avoiding eye contact with the jubilant Thaloxi crowd. As the tribunal adjourned, reporters swarmed around David, Mike, and Celera, eager to capture their reactions. David spoke eloquently about the significance of the ruling, not just for the Thaloxi, but for all indigenous cultures facing exploitation across the galaxies. "This decision reaffirms that cultural rights are to be respected universally," David told the gathered media. "It's a victory not only for the Thaloxi, but for anyone who believes in the sanctity of cultural heritage and the rule of law." Celera addressed the media in her own language, which was then translated for the reporters. "Today, justice was served. We thank our legal team for their dedication and for believing in our cause." After the interviews, the trio retreated to a quieter part of the tribunal building to decompress. "I can hardly believe it's over," Mike said, sinking into a chair. "It's not just over." "We won," David corrected, still processing the outcome. "And rightly so. The evidence was undeniable." Celera nodded, her composure returning. "What happens next, though? How do we ensure that Galaxy-wide follows through with the reparations and cessation of mining?" "That's part of our job too," David assured her. "We'll monitor their compliance. And if they step out of line, we'll be ready. As will the tribunal. This ruling is binding, and they'll have eyes on Galaxy-wide now," Mike added. The conversation shifted from the case to future implications. They discussed potential follow-up actions and how they could continue to support the Thaloxi in rebuilding what had been damaged. As the day turned to evening, David, Mike, and Celera left the tribunal together, their steps lighter, their bond strengthened by the trial they had endured and the victory they had achieved. The stars seemed to shine a bit brighter above them, a silent nod to their hard-fought success. Chapter 8. Beyond the Verdict. As the echoes of their legal victory faded, David, Mike, and Celera found themselves gathered in David's office one last time to discuss the future. The walls, once lined with legal tomes and evidence displays, now hosted celebratory messages and images of the Lixora fields restored. David leaned against his desk, a relaxed smile on his face. "Well, it's not every day you get to change the course of interstellar law." Mike chuckled, flipping through a digital notepad filled with follow-up tasks. "No kidding. I feel like we just got out of an epic saga. What's next for you, David? Another big case?" "Actually, I was thinking about taking some time off. This case has opened my eyes to a lot of things, not least of which is the need for a little rest," David admitted, glancing out the window at the bustling cityscape below. Celera, standing by the window, turned to face them. "And you, Mike? What will you do now?" Mike shrugged, his smile fading into a contemplative frown. "I guess it's back to the usual grind, unless another intergalactic legal battle needs fighting. But honestly, working on this case with you both, it's made me think about focusing more on advocacy and rights protection." Celera nodded thoughtfully. "That sounds like a worthy pursuit. And you, Celera? What's next for the Thaloxi?" David asked, genuinely interested. Solara's face brightened. We have much to rebuild, but there is also much to celebrate. We hope to establish a cultural exchange program. We want to educate others about our culture and learn about theirs. It would help prevent misunderstandings like this in the future. That's a fantastic idea, David said, impressed. If there's anything Mike and I can do to help set that up, you know you only have to ask. I may take you up on that offer, Solara responded with a warm smile. In fact, I was hoping you might consider being a guest speaker at our first cultural seminar. It would mean a lot to have you share your experiences. David was taken aback, honored by the invitation. I'd be honored, Solara. It sounds like a great opportunity to continue supporting each other. As they discussed the potential for future collaborations, the conversation turned to more personal reflections about what they had learned from the case and from each other. You know, Mike started, leaning back in his chair, this case really showed me how much impact we can have. It's not just about winning or losing in court. It's about making sure we stand up for what's right, even if it's across the universe. David nodded in agreement. It's been an eye-opening experience. Working with you, Solara, and learning about the Thaloxy has changed the way I view my work and my responsibilities as a lawyer. It's more than just a job. It's about making a difference. Solara looked at both men, her expression one of gratitude. And I have learned so much from you both about perseverance and the intricacies of law. You have not only helped save a part of our world, but also strengthened our resolve to protect our culture. As the meeting drew to a close, they stood together, looking out at the skyline, their thoughts on the future. David finally broke the silence. This isn't just the end of a case. It's the beginning of a new chapter for all of us. Here's to new beginnings. Mike raised an imaginary glass, which Solara and David happily mimicked. They laughed together, the sound echoing around the room, filled with a sense of accomplishment and anticipation for whatever challenges and adventures lay ahead.